If Chelsea were behaving like that, the media would paint it and say, well, they're just being street smart, they're just being savvy. When Forest try those tactics, you know, we're football terrorists.
Hello there and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and to the antidote to football discussions. It's time for Football Terrorists. We're recording on Sunday the 31st of May, a week after the end of an up and down season for the Reds, with 4 managers, a relegation battle and a memorable Europa League campaign. Coming up in today's show, we'll have some thoughts from our panel about the season just past. We'll have some suggestions to improve the game in the era of VAR and key match incident panels. Our team will compete in a series of games in the hope of choosing their tricky tree tracks of their tears. And Jeremy Davis will join us with the final Football Terrorist sketch for the 2025-26 campaign. And we're also joined by the voice of the City Ground, stadium announcer Mark Dennison, with his end of season thoughts. I'm your host, Rich Ferraro, and I'm joined by the Maradona in the Midlands. So for the last time this season, let's play Football Terrorists.
Football Terrorists.
Now, just before we start, a quick parish notice about the forthcoming World Cup. Now, we will be doing some short-form content during the tournament. Baz is going to be leading on that, and we're going to have a few guest voices coming through, and it's just going to be some little roundups here and there, but you'll hear more about that nearer the time. Stephen, before we introduce you formally for this episode of Football Terrorists, just a quick word, because you're planning to do some World Cup podcasting as well, aren't you?
I am, yeah. So on my England podcast, Magnificent Goal, I'll be hosting a few World Cup related shows over the next few weeks, some look backs at past tournaments, some interviews, and some chats about the current England team. So if you are an England fan and interested and looking forward to the World Cup, just search for Magnificent Goal wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Maradona in the Midlands, hello.
Hello.
Over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. So let's welcome today's panel and give them an early chance to flex their footballing brains. Let's rate Forest managers this season in order from worst to best. Let's start off with the old favourite, Tom Newton. Tom, go ahead.
Morning. So in 4th place, I'm going to put Ange because obviously he didn't win a game. 3rd, I'm going to put Deitch. I just think the football was horrific. I'm going to put Nuno for 2nd because obviously there's still a bit of love out there, and Vitor for getting the job done and taking us to a Europa League semi-final.
Interesting. I've got a feeling this isn't going to differ much from panellist to panellist, but I might be surprised. Let's go over to Stephen, see what his thoughts are.
I'm going to have Nuno bottom because he walked out on us early doors. And I think he threw that game at home against West Ham. Maybe not deliberately, but certainly through his actions and his mindset at the time. If Nuno hadn't have left, all the chaos that followed wouldn't have happened. I would have Ange behind him because he didn't win a game. At least he showed some humility later in the season, admitting he should have never took the Forest job. Then it's Sean Dyche on the basis of at least we did get a few wins under him, and they probably did prove crucial in the end. And then top of the tree, Vitor, because he saved us and got us to the semi-finals of the Europa, and we had some fun along the way.
Yes, we did have some fun, didn't we? So Stephen surprised me a little bit there, but let's see if young George Edwards is going to throw in a spanner into the works and surprise as well. George, what's your order?
Well, Stephen took the words out of my mouth with Nuno. I think without Nuno leaving, Forest wouldn't have had the car crash of Ange and Deitch. So Nuno has to be bottom. Vitor has to be top because he resurrected the season and gave us some positivity, both thinking about the season and looking into next season. And then, I mean, it is hard between the other two. I think post-Forest, Ange has annoyed me far less than Sean Dyche has. But while they were at Forest, it was certainly Dyche who got us a 3-0 win at Anfield that is very memorable amongst slowly getting us over the line in the Europa League. So I'd go Vitor, Dyche, Ange, and then Nuno bottom.
Great. Wow.
What do you reckon, Maradona?
Well, I think at the start, this has been a very persuasive argument from George and Stephen. At the beginning of the discussion, I was very much in Tom's camp there, even though I was quite a big fan of Ange at the time, especially with that picture going around of him as a young Ange with the mullet and everything. He looked pretty hot in those days. So, but I think George and Stephen have changed my mind, so I'm going to go with them.
Okay, all right, okay. Now, I mean, I'm just going to point out that Forest has always been a club that have been about being disruptors and so on. So, to give Tom a bit of credence, you could say that Nuno was being a disruptor. He was just being a disruptor against the club rather than for the club in terms of how he went about it. I think it's very much worth pointing out that there's an absolutely excoriating article on The Athletic by Roshane Thomas, which emerged pretty much as soon as the final whistle went on West Ham's campaign, talking a lot of let's just say it, threw shade over Nuno as a manager. And it's one of those that suggests that, yeah, when things are going his way, Nuno's a very happy guy. And when things aren't, he's quite a prickly character. And we always suspected that. But that article certainly added new light to that. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Now, with that, I'm going to give 2 points to Tom and to Maradona, and I'm going to give 3 points to Stephen and George because they are being, as we discussed, and as is the name of the podcast, football terrorists. And that's a theme to which we will return when we speak to Mark Dennison in part 2 of this podcast. Anyway, so it's time to say a big hello to those of you who are joining us, whether you are watching or whether you're listening. And we're proud to be the original Nottingham Forest podcast. We were established in 2008, providing match reports, weekly roundups, updates on the women's team, and much, much more. So visit 1865.football for links to our social media, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube channels. That's where you'll find our World Cup content as well before we take a summer break.
It's time for our first game proper. Penny for your thoughts. In this feature, I'm going to give each of our panellists a topic and they will have 30 seconds to share their thoughts. Let's assume that Elliot Anderson is leaving and we will get £100 million or more for him. What would you do with the money? You will get points for being specific with your ideas. So let's go in the opposite direction this time round. So, George, what would you do with that £100 million burning a hole in your pocket?
I think firstly, Forest and Marinakis would want more than £100 million. And I think they've got to look at what Aston Villa did when they sold Jack Grealish. They've got to plug a lot of holes, a lot of gaps in the squad with that money and not try and spend it all in one go. I think the club have identified 4 key areas and 4 key positions that they want to strengthen. And they've got to use that in that way. I can't bring any specifics. I think Hayden Hackney is one player a lot of fans are talking about. It's up to the club to scout, but don't spend it all in one go. Spread it across the squad and give us a squad to build for Europe again.
Thank you, George. Next, let's go over to Stephen Topless.
Yeah, hard to disagree. Spread the money around and use it wisely. I think we need to look at another striker. I think a right back, because Ola Aina's injuries are becoming a bit of a problem, particularly towards the end of the season. And Hayden Hackney in midfield, I think, would be a good move. We do need a midfielder. Maybe another goalkeeper to look for the future if James Trafford is available. And I'd also chuck a couple of million at Fabrizio Romano to never tweet anything about Forest ever again.
That would be nice. Tom, give us your brain ideas.
I've never been with Forest selling players. It's one of those where it's when the players do go, I'm not too bothered. It's how you replace them. And this season, well, this pre-season, everybody's got to be aligned. Got to avoid the chaos of what we had last season. Everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet. I'll go with what the guys have said. Ola Aina, I think he needs some competition at right back. We need a striker because we can't rely on who will be a 35-year-old Chris Wood in December. And obviously, Hayden Hackney's might be one where it might be a replacement for Elliot Anderson. So it's how we spend it, and we can't just waste it because it's burning a hole in our back pocket. So yeah, spread it around nicely and really think about what we're going to spend it on.
Thank you, Tom.
What do you reckon, Maradona?
I'm slightly different thought to everybody else, not for the first time. I think we've got a lot of quantity in the squad already, and without European football this season, I'd be thinking more about going for maybe one or two quality signings rather than spreading it around too much. If anything, I'd sort of look at maybe trimming the squad, maybe letting one of the strikers go, one of the wingers go, and just really not going all in, because I think we need to keep some in reserve just for the new rules, the profit and sustainability rules. I think probably, it's not a very exciting or sexy way of doing it, but put it in the bank and just to get us over the new laws and everything, just to have that profit buffer there for the next coming season or two would be a decent idea. And I think replacing Elliot is going to be, well, impossible really. There isn't anybody else in the country who does all the things he does at the level he does. So yeah, it's maybe. I mean, I'm not going to suggest any names because, quite frankly, 99% of the players we sign these days I've never heard of. So I don't know where they're going to find them from. But yeah, I'd go for quality rather than quantity. I think is a take-home point from me.
Okay, thank you very much. George, if we get 100 million plus for Elliot Anderson, I believe that the money from the Elanga transfer is in the books for this season. So that means that presumably we'll be relatively safe when it comes to PSR calculations, and therefore we will have some spending power.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think this next season is when the rules change to be aligned with Europe as well. And Forest have never really this season been in doubt of breaching the European FFP regulations. I think there was more on the brink of the Premier League, but with the sales of last season, they're okay in that. So I think Forest will have a lot of spending power. And I think that apart from the first season, obviously all that spending that really did screw us over, and the fact that you could make less losses than other Premier League sides. I think once Forest have been on an equal keel with other Premier League sides, they've handled that side of it very well. So they had to sort of breach, if you like, to stay in the Premier League. They took the hit for that. And since then, they have been above water, and you've got to sort of commend Nicholas Randall and the other people involved for that, because Forest can flex the muscles this summer in the transfer market, hopefully.
Well, you get a bonus point there for suggesting commending Nicholas Randall, because you're the only person I've ever heard doing that. Tom...
I don't do it very often, so yes, especially when season ticket renewals come out.
And Tom, again, going back to that theme of Forest being disruptors, being football terrorists. I mean, Forest did, walk so others could run, because everyone's heaping praise on Sunderland, but they spent more than Forest did last summer when Forest got promoted, didn't they?
Yeah, and it's refreshing.
They spent it better, but they spent more.
Yeah, it's refreshing for the Premier League rather than having the same three teams what have come up, gone down. Like in the past, it's been like Norwich, your West Broms, etc. So at least there's like some teams who are actually giving it a good go. And obviously, we was probably created the mould for that, for actually breaching the PSR and staying in the league and everything. But going back to Elliot Anderson, is that people sometimes forget that Marinakis is probably like one of the guys who you don't really want to negotiate with, because until somebody gives him the money, he's not going to sell on the cheap. So if somebody doesn't stump up like 100 million, 150 million or whatever, Elliot Anderson will not leave Nottingham Forest, because they see him as like a real like saleable asset, like a commodity kind of thing. So if he doesn't get the money, I've got a funny feeling that we might see Elliot Anderson in a Forest shirt again. But like it says in football, anything can change in a split second, can't it?
I'm less convinced, because if nothing else, I think Man United, Man City, it's a changeable situation because Maresca does play possession based, so he might like Anderson just as much as Pep does. But Man United, if they see someone they like, they don't get put off by price tag. They'll just spend the money. And so actually with Man United, we could just say, actually, give us an extra 10 million. They'll be like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem.
You're on about signing that Edison, aren't they, from Italy, who's playing for one of the Italian clubs. So, but it's one of those, it's all about the money, isn't it? And if Forest don't get that money, it doesn't go. I honestly do.
Will we be in trouble if we don't sell Anderson for 100 plus million?
No, because I don't think so. Because if you read the reports, what you've mentioned about the Elanga being on this year's accounts, we might be okay than obviously the European revenue. So, but there's people who are far more qualified who make these decisions than me. So I'll just sit back this summer, relax, and see what happens the next
Okay.
season.
Stephen, Maradona the Midlands alluded to maybe players out as well. So personally, I really, really, really wanted Taiwo to get a chance and score a goal in that last match of the season against Bournemouth because I have a feeling that's his last match for Forest. Um, because purely and simply, he's been at the club. He is the longest serving Premier League player because he was the first signing when we got promoted. He's got a year left in his contract. He'd be real. I was discussing with a bloke next to me. I can see him at Coventry, for example. I can see him going to one of the newly promoted clubs and being really, really good and popular there in the same way as he is a bit of a cult hero for Forest. If he's going to go, now's the time for him to go, isn't it?
Yeah, because this is the opportunity for Forest to get some money back on him. And um, as much as I love Taiwo, he's not been first choice at Forest for a while. He's obviously had his injury concerns, which hopefully he's come back from now. And yeah, I think it's an opportunity for Forest to let him go and let him find some first team football elsewhere. Might be a Coventry, might be a place where he can feel the love as the main man, like he did for us in that first season back. So yeah, it'd be sad to see him leave, but he would go with our blessing and best wishes.
George.
And I think Stephen makes a good point there because I think Forest would have maybe found it difficult to recoup that money until now. Because if you think about the last two seasons, the first two seasons he struggled with injuries when he was the first choice. But the last two seasons, when he's not been the first choice, he's actually been fit for most of the both seasons. He's just not played because he's not been the first choice. And he's obviously scored a few goals towards the back end of the season. So if Forest are ever going to get anywhere near to what they paid for him, I think now is the time to cash in. As much as he has scored recently, I think they've got to capitalise on that.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Just also on the topic of players out, I mean, it seems everyone seems to be in agreement that Dan and Doyd wants to leave and wants to go back to Italy. And I don't think anyone would begrudge him that, which means one of the wingers off the books. Uh, let's talk about right back, as a couple of you mentioned it. Yeah, sure, we know that Ola, he's a funny old player, isn't he? Because he often looks knackered even when he's fully fit, frankly. And then he gets injured and you realise actually he was fully fit beforehand, and he contributed a lot. I mean, worth mentioning, Savona will hopefully be available again. And I think it's worth remembering that actually he's quite a good signing in the end. Like he looked a little bit ponderous in his first two or three matches, but he adapted really quickly. He showed that we signed him as essentially a right-sided defender, but he popped up in the box quite a lot and scored two or three goals. So George, what do you reckon about that? Does that mean that we don't need to sign another fullback?
I think for me, that's one of the priorities, to be honest, because I think Nico Williams needs probably Nico Nets to come in or somebody else to challenge him on that side. And as much as he is a right-footed player, he's performed far better on the left the last couple of years. So I think I'd keep him there. But I do think I need somebody to push him and maybe even take his place because I think to the lapses of defensive, he's a very good one-on-one defender, but the amount of lapses that you see, I think to Midtjylland at home, where if he switched on, follows his man, he can see it. He didn't do much that game, but the one thing he did was allow them to score that header at the back post, and it gave us a mountain to climb, which obviously we did in Denmark. And I just think he needs to be pushed because he's got a quality to be a team better than Forest, and I think it's his mentality that is why he's at Forest at the age that he is. So I think he needs somebody to push him at those levels to be fit and to be performing because he seems far too comfortable for me at the minute. And like you say, Savona's a very good player, can get forward, can score a goal, but I don't think Einer's place was ever in doubt because they were both fit at different times. I think if Einer and Savona were both fit, it'd be Einer every week. So I'd like to see Forest sign somebody to properly push him to perform at his best consistently and be fit.
Tom.
And it was on his concentration in the Leeds game. I know he got shoved at left back, that debacle at Elland Road in February, but Bogle ran off the back of him and scored, didn't he? So, like George says, he's got that mentality of like sometimes he like loses his runner, but yeah, we need to sign competition for him because I think he's been a bit too comfortable there for the last couple of seasons.
But Tom, the rumours are that Forest wanted to sign Archie Brown from Fenerbahce, who is a left back. So what do you make of that?
Well, if that's true, then it was like might have Nico Williams at right back in his obviously his favourable position because obviously he's right-footed. But over the next coming weeks and months, you're going to hear no end of rumours. So it's kind of like see what happens.
Okay, married on the Midlands, just to come to you on a very quick topic before I come back to something else. So, Stefan Ortega, if he wants to stay, would you keep him?
Yeah, I think so. He's a quality goalkeeper, isn't he? And then
And would he be your number one?
no, I think Matt Sells is justified being number one. I don't think he's done anything to suggest he should be replaced as the number one. But yeah, I mean, if you can have a goalkeeper of the quality of Ortega as your number two, I think you're laughing, aren't you?
Okay, and I mean, I will just point out as somebody, we've talked about right backs and we've talked about goalkeepers. I want a goalkeeper who's willing to take the number one shirt and a right back who's willing to take the number two shirt, because essentially what you're saying,
Got
Ola,
Matt
is that
Turner
you're
back
the
then.
well, I mean, I was again with the bloke next to me. We were saying, who was the last number one we had? It was like, yeah, Turner. I don't understand why Ortega didn't take it. I don't understand why Sells hasn't taken it when he's been the first choice goalkeeper. And Ola's basically saying, I'm the 34th best player in the squad. So if he's not got faith in himself to be the number two, how can we have it? Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about Hayden Hackney and a couple of suggestions for how we can improve the English game.
1865.
Terrorists.
Welcome back to 1865. Now, just before we move on from transfer talk that we had earlier on, Stephen, everyone's talking about Hayden Hackney as the replacement for Elliot Anderson. And maybe if Tom's right, maybe as the competition in the middle of the park. I was under the impression he started off as a winger and then played as a number 10, but everyone's talking about him as being a number 8 or a 6'8" type player. What do we know about him?
Well, he's been one of the standout players in the Championship in a Middlesbrough team that plays or has played pretty good football over the last few seasons. He's a very tidy operator in the middle of the park, and I think because of his attacking, the positions he's played more attacking earlier in his career, I think it's given him that good technical ability.
Which I suppose is similar to Anderson, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a similar profile to Anderson there, and on the basis of the position that we're in the league, I think there's some really good players in the Championship waiting to make that step up, and we are in that position now where we can pick up people like Elliot, people like Hayden Hackney, and give them the chance to develop in the Premier League. Because when we were down there, we used to see good players getting picked up by mid-table Premier League clubs and going on and being really successful. So I think that's the position we're in, and we should be looking to the Championship, some good up-and-coming players. And Hackney's got that pedigree in the England age groups as well, under 21s and so on, much like Elliot Anderson. So there's a lot of similarities there.
Okay. George, we're not known for picking up Championship players and using them to improve our team. Well, we've signed those mid-level players and hope for them to improve. It has been the likes of, well, most recently, Bakwa. So is that something, our scouting network seems to be based predominantly overseas. So would that be a bit of a change in tack from Forest if they do go for Hackney?
Yeah, I think it represents positivity. I think he's a player that a lot of teams have been touting as ready to step up to the Premier League. I think a big part of his success has been the guy next to him. Is it Morris or something like that, for Middlesbrough, who's done a lot of the dirty work for him, so he can be the more sort of eccentric player. And you sort of almost think about Sangare and Anderson. Anderson's looked a lot better this season when Sangare's been there, so maybe they could sort of bounce off each other if he does come in. And I do think he does offer maybe not quite the ball winning ability that Anderson does, but apart from that, there's very similar traits there. So it could be a good direction for Forest. And yeah, I think their transfer policy will be quite broad this summer, and that's for the best. If they see someone like Hackney or someone else in the Championship they like, go and get him. But equally, if there's somebody abroad that has similar attributes, then you don't know. You think maybe the abroad market is possibly a bit cheaper, so that's what might come into the thinking. But I like Forest looking everywhere that they can.
Yeah, and married on the Midlands. Just last thing on this particular topic. I know you're quite old school generally. Would you prefer signing a player for 20 million pounds from the Championship in the hope that he can grow into a Premier League player, or would you prefer signing maybe another 10-15 million pound Brazilian and then seeing if they can progress.
Oh, I think I'd always every Brazilian every time, wouldn't you? It's a lot more exciting.
Yeah, but also for every Murillo and Igor Jesus, we've also had a Jean Victor and Carlos Miguel and Cubano.
Yeah, just don't sign goalkeepers. I mean, Greasy used to say it in the old days. Brazilian goalkeepers. Say Brazilian goalkeepers. But a Scottish one.
The other thing on that as well, just is the English players and British grown players. I think that's going to be a big thing for squads to have moving forwards. And certainly if we want to get back into Europe again, I think it is important that we have more domestically produced players, whether that's from our own academy or players that we pick up from other clubs. So that it might be something that features in Forest transfer thinking moving forward.
Okay, Tom.
I think with the we've got too many. I won't say too many. We've got enough project players in terms of your McAtees, your Backwards, your Hutchinsons. We need players now to be plug-in players. So when we mention about that 100 million, it's got to be like obviously spent wisely. So we can't like spend all the money and think, oh, they might be all right in like 18 months' time. I think we need players now. I would say we're getting on the way of being a really established Premier League club because we're going into our 5th year. We need players now to actually come in and do the job rather than like waiting for them to flourish. So, yeah, Hayden Hackney, whether he can be the replacement or you buy him and then get somebody who's ready-made to be the Anderson replacement. I think, yeah, like I said, we need plug-in players rather than project players this summer. And if that's only 4 or 5 players, so be it.
Yeah, I will just add in there that we've got 2 players who are the mainstays of the first team who we thought were going to be project players and actually surprised us with the speed of their progress in Murillo and Anderson. So, yeah, remains to be seen. Okay, just to move on because time is against us and we need to just move on to the next topic, which is I just want some quick thoughts from the panel. So a recent news story that came out about 2-3 weeks ago said that robots have now got the ability to run the half marathon in less than an hour. Now, Premier League footballers tend to run about 10 kilometres in a match. So is it now time for robot referees and robot VAR who can keep up with the action? George, you're a runner. Tell me, would you think there'd be make more sense to have a robot who can not only run but keep their wits about them and make objective decisions?
No. I mean, you wanted short answers. My short answer is no. My slightly longer answer is you do need somebody who understands players, and I think the ref cams this season have actually helped. I know a lot of referees haven't done themselves any favours with some of the performances this season, but when they've released the ref cams, I think you do see how referees control a game and that they do command the respect of the players. And if you got rid of referees and replaced it with robots, I don't think that would exist. So I think they certainly need reform. We'll get onto that, but robot referees probably isn't it. And please can robots not run half marathons faster than me?
I'm afraid that ship has already sailed there, George. Married on the Midlands, I mean, AI is trained on existing data. So in theory, you could just upload the laws of the game to the server and we'd get objective decisions every time.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking forward, in say 50 years' time, I think we'll definitely have AI referees. It won't necessarily even be a physical body or robot on the pitch, just a voice,
just a celestial being,
just something hovering over the pitch, or something that was just a voice booming out from the sky. So, in 50 years' time, I can't believe we'll have human maybe even not.
You might be a bit optimistic saying it'll take 50 years to get
maybe
to that
not
point.
Even human players. Maybe we'll have not robots.
Yeah, well, we'll humanoids. We'll be like those We'll be like the humans in Wall-E though. By that point, I mean, I won't. I might not be here in 50 years' time, but yeah, people just.
But I think at the moment it's too soon. That's my point to make is at the moment no, but I think it's inevitable.
Okay. Tom, what do you think about the idea that at least if you've got robots, there'll be no dissent because we just equip the robots with lasers?
I'm dead against it. I've never been one for the fictional world and robots and running things and
it's
things
not
like
fiction,
that.
Tom. It's real. It's real.
No.
We're here.
No, I'm old school. I am. Like I said, I wasn't.
Well, you've always complained about how I believe your precise words were Bruno Fernandes is a whinging ratbag. So imagine if you could threaten him with actual physical violence rather than just a potential yellow card.
You know that saying the game's gone? It will well and truly be gone once you have like a robot. I saw a robot on one of those Facebook reels on this morning, and it fell over when they tried to get it to do something. So there you go, case closed.
Well, we've all had wingers like that, haven't we? And Stephen, I mean the issue here is actually to do with objective decision making. Forest have fared reasonably well, but we're recording this the morning after the Champions League final. You're really not telling me that last night was the first time in 63 matches that Arsenal committed a penalty-worthy foul in their own area.
I think that's been proven very much not the case, isn't it? But yeah, on the subject of robots and all this, I mean, maybe not go full on robots or humanoids, but use the technology to have cameras that can keep up with play, and maybe cameras from above. I mean, there's so much the way that technology is developing. Just use, cameras and lasers and things like that can show patterns of play on the pitch, and maybe that can keep up with play and just have that indisputable line that runs across a defensive back four or something like that.
As ever, there's going to be a counter argument, which is, I think it was in 2020, we saw Ryan Yates's bum being offside in the cup match against Chelsea. And now, having Phil Foden having had his arse cheeks breaching the virtual line there, that's a decision that, as George was saying, that's a decision that robots make, that humans would, if they were in charge, would be able to say, yeah, your arse can't really be offside. You're not scoring with your arse there, are you?
Yeah, and it feeds back into the argument: have we just gone too far with the technology, and we need to claw it back? Because it seems like nobody's happy with VAR. It's fine for certain decisions, but there are other ones that come along, and you think, come on, you can let that go in the flow, in the spirit of the game. That would never be offside normally. And yeah, are we just trying to strive for too much perfection in football and decision making? I'd say so, and maybe this robot technology would just make that even worse.
Okay, all right, time to move on. Thank you very much. So, in terms of the points, currently we've got Maradon the Midlands and Tom bringing up the rear on 3 points. We've got Stephen on 4 points, and George is currently on 6 points and in the lead. Still to come in part 2 of Football Terrorists, we will speak to the voice of the City Ground, Mark Dennison, and we'll have another chance for our panellists to win some points and choose their tricky tree tracks of their tiers. But before we do that, it's time for this.
The Football Terrorists Sketch by Jeremy Davis. As anyone who noticed the award of the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize will attest, sport and politics really do mix. And so it seems fitting that with Nottingham Forest's return to European competition this season, that our relationship with our continental neighbours has been so much in the news, and that our eventual exit from Europe was brought about by English opposition. It's 10 years since the Brexit referendum, of course, which is another reason that the issue of the country's place in Europe has been on people's minds. In 2016, eerily, Forest finished 16th in the league table, albeit in the Championship rather than the Premier League. The club was at the tail end of the Fawaz era, with Mr Marinakis arriving on the scene a year later. They went through a paltry 3 managers that season, at which point the Conservative Party said, "Hold my beer," before installing a revolving door on number 10 and going through 4 prime ministers before eventually being booted out of office by a weary British public. Turning back time to even before Cameron, former Prime Minister Tony Blair was back in the news this week after publishing a 5,600-word essay, almost as many words as has been spoken by fans complaining about Mateus Cunha's controversial goal against Forest at Old Trafford, in which the alleged Newcastle fan drew his own sporting analogy, claiming that the UK was facing relegation from the Premier League of Nations, which sounds a lot more exciting than the EU or the UN, so perhaps they should give it a go. If only Woodrow Wilson had had the FA's marketing men on his team when he launched the original League of Nations in the aftermath of the First World War, people might have been much more excited by it. One of the candidates for Blair's former job, Wes Streeting, has said that he hopes the country can rejoin the EU during his lifetime, or I'm hoping the timeline for Forest getting back into Europe is slightly shorter. Another of the hot political issues of the day is, of course, technology, especially the rise of AI and the threat that it might take away all our jobs. Footballers are surely amongst those whose livelihoods are safe, along with plumbers and embalmers, according to Google. Despite the best efforts of Peter Crouch, robots and football just don't mix. As anyone who has watched any of those videos emanating from China of robots taking on human athletes can tell you, scientists are still struggling to produce a robot that can run more than a few steps without falling over spectacularly. And there's not much call for that these days in professional football, at least since Jurgen Klinsmann hung up his boots. Technological advances have significantly changed the language of football. Never mind VAR or GPS putting old-fashioned concepts like having a good engine out of fashion, now that said engine can actually be tracked and analysed, and no one is chanting about the VAR being a wanker, although it might explain why they were sufficiently distracted to miss Cunha's handball. But it's not just technology in the game that has changed the way we talk about it. The innovation of ring pulls on tin goods, for example, means that the ability to open a can of beans with that left foot is no longer so remarkable, requiring little more than good balance and a sharp toenail. Google AI puts the date when baked beans started featuring ring pulls at 2004, meaning that the last Forest player to be ascribed this ability may have been Chris Commons. One analogy that's still very much in use is the roller coaster season, and that certainly applies to the season just gone for Nottingham Forest, which has featured enough ups and downs to leave us all feeling dazed and a bit nauseous. But, just like over-enthusiastic Blackpool Pleasure Beach visitors stumbling unsteadily off the big one looking like they might be sick, you know that once the coaster gets going again in August, we'll all be piling back on for another ride.
1865.
Terrorists.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. You'll find part 2 of this podcast adjacent to this one. See you very soon.